Thank you for your time. Thank
Great
you for joining
pleasure,
the
great
program.
honour.
Do you miss being Prime Minister?
It's a wonderful job, and I loved it. I loved every moment of it, but it's also, a very demanding job, and there are certainly compensations to, a life of relative ease. What I miss is being able to take some of the decisions, and I feel frustrated by the way some things are going now. Clearly we've got a Labour government in charge in the UK, and a lot of the stuff is not stuff I would be doing, and I find that very frustrating. So in that sense, if you ask me, do I think things would be better if I was in charge? Yes.
Well, do you feel like you deserve to be the leader still of this country?
Of course, and as you will discover, and I mean, there's no point in, you can't expect me to try and hide my views on this. It's all there in the pages of Unleashed. I'm
going to count how many times you name your book.
Okay,
there's
that's
one.
Okay. Look, I mean, I think so. One of the arguments, I got lots of stuff wrong. I continue to regret many mistakes I made, but I think that we had a great mandate in 2019 to deliver a very, very good project for the UK, which was about, not just about Brexit, but about levelling up the country. UK is a very imbalanced economy, and we had a massive mandate to do it. And we did it with 3 years. We packed a lot in, but we had 2.5 years to go, and I think we would have won again.
Could you win again?
Well, right now, unfortunately, we've blown it because
But could you?
I stepped down in the summer of 2022 at a time when, as I never cease to remind people, we were only a handful of points behind in the polls, and this Reform Party, which is a sort of, anti-immigration party on the right, was nowhere, and it's now puffballed into this excrescence that's taking a lot of Conservative votes, and that was never happening under me. We had a big coalition.
So could you, as leader of the Conservatives, win again, do you think?
Oh, well, could I win again? Right.
Yes.
Oh, I see. Look, as I've said many times before, I think that my chances of becoming Prime Minister again are about as good as my being blinded by a champagne cork locked in a disused fridge, reincarnated as an olive, or decapitated by a frisbee. But have you ever known anybody decapitated by a frisbee? I mean, yes, apparently people are blinded by champagne corks. A lot in Italy, I'm told.
Really?
Yeah, maybe it's Prosecco corks.
But the miracles happened before. Could it happen again?
I think it's, like I said, Tara, my answer to your first question, I'm very happy in my life now. Yes, I'm frustrated about the direction of things, but what's happening now in the UK is we've got a Conservative leadership, campaign going on, election, and some very good people, and whoever it is, I'm going to be supporting.
You have said that in your book there is loads and loads of self-loathing. What do you loathe the most?
What's the thing that I loathe the most about myself? I think it's just my incurable modesty. I just think I think it's my inveterate habit of self-deprecation. How
about not taking questions seriously?
I think that. Honestly, I think when I look back at the time in Number 10, I mean, I say this in the book, Unleashed.
Twice, okay.
I think the biggest problem was a complacency about my political position. And really, I think that I thought, we'd won this huge majority, we had a big agenda, my sort of political training had been as Mayor of London, which I was for 8 years. And the beauty of that job was, I said to one, go and he goeth, another come and he cometh. And if I wanted to greenlight a new cycle hire scheme, it happened. If I wanted to build a cable car across the river, it happened. If I wanted to build a new, Olympicopolis cultural project, it happened. And I had no backbenchers. I had no dissent. I had no people questioning what I
You sound like a despot.
Yeah. I was
and
a
you
monarch.
loved it.
I was a monarch. And it was a terrible... So it was a brilliant preparation for being... for running the UK in one sense, in that London is London on its own is like one of the biggest economies in Europe. It's huge. And I learnt in great detail housing, planning, policing, crime, transport, a lot of the complex local government finance, a lot of the complexities of modern politics. But it did not prepare me for what it was like to cope with a lot of conservative backbenchers after 10, 11, 12 years of Tory government, when you've got the backbenches pretty saturated with disappointment and discontent. And so one of my biggest failings was complacency about that.
Does that complacency show that perhaps you're not a great leader?
Well, I think that if I point to the things that we got done,
yes, but
they were very considerable. I think there's...
You're talking about what got undone.
Yes, and I think that complacent, failed to appreciate people's discontent. But I think when I'm given the chance to motivate, rally people behind a project, get something done at great speed, then I have been in the past pretty useful. And whether it was the delivering the Olympics on time and on budget, or some of the big transport projects that we did, to putting a new bus on the streets of London, completely designed afresh within 4 years, all that kind of stuff we did at great speed, to the vaccine rollout that was the fastest in Europe. And as I have not tired of saying over the last few days, the heart of the story in this book, whose title I will not repeat, it's like unmuzzled or uncorseted or untrammeled, it's unleashed. The heart of this book is a story about national independence. And it was a struggle to get that type of national independence. And it's about the 3-year contest within the Conservative Party to get a full and proper Brexit. And it's about how that particular model of national independence was actually vital for Britain when we were hit, like the rest of the world, by the worst pandemic in 100 years. And how, quite unexpectedly, a particular aspect of that freedom that we had won, that legal regulatory freedom, enabled us to do something different from other European countries in such a way as to protect the lives of hundreds of thousands of elderly and vulnerable British people. And so Brexit saved lives because we were able to do something faster than our European friends. And it also helped us to come out of the COVID restrictions faster. And what that was, we came out of this thing called the European Medicines Agency, which meant that 27 other countries, European EU countries, waited and waited weeks and weeks and weeks for the EMA, the European Medicines Agency, to approve AstraZeneca and Pfizer and Moderna and all these vaccines. And we decided, weeks and weeks ahead of them, that they were good. And so we began jabbing. And the British people turned out to love vaccinations. And Julius Caesar, I think, was the first to observe that we were the most tattooed people he'd ever seen. And we had no inhibitions about getting vaccinated. But it was unquestionably helped by the licensing that we were able to do sooner. It was also helped because we were outside the EU vaccine procurement regime. So, and that, I'm sorry to say, they slightly, they had some problems with that, whereas we didn't. We really had a lot. And so by March 2021, And COVID was a total nightmare. It was a nightmare for Australia. It was a nightmare for us. But by March 2021, we had vaccinated 45% of the adult population of the UK, and of the most vulnerable, so the over 80s, I mean, it was getting on for 100% because they were all turning up, rolling up their sleeves and getting vaccinated. So a huge amount of protection was starting to envelop the UK population, whereas in the EU, by the same date, by March 2021, it was down at like 10%. And they noticed the difference. And so our European friends and partners, were indignant. Well, there's a bit in the book where I explain what happened, and they got so aerated about the speed of the UK vaccine rollout that at one point they even sequestered, impounded a load of our vaccine doses, 5 million doses, at a plant called the Helix plant in Leiden in Holland. And, I had to consider how to, at one point I almost, sent ribs up the canals to get our vaccine doses.
Was that real? Did you actually consult?
I did consult the military, but...
And what were you proposing?
I really was trying to look at the options. And of course, it's insane. Holland's a friend. Holland's a great NATO country, But we were in a crazy situation in which... So
you were proposing, you were asking if it was feasible to invade Holland.
I was looking at I didn't want to invade anywhere. I just wanted, by way of a kind of clandestine, nocturnal operation with some guys in balaclavas, I presume, I wanted to get our vaccines. I mean, obviously, it wasn't going to happen. But I felt it was my responsibility to look at all the options. We were vaccinating very, very fast.
So you seriously looked at that?
We were giving a lot of protection. And I felt that in a matter of life and death for the British people, which is what it was, when people were dying, I mean, hundreds of people were dying a day. I mean, I think it was, up to 1,000 in January a day, right? And lots of elderly and vulnerable people were terrified of getting this disease. And when they needed those doses, I genuinely thought it was my responsibility to look at ways in which, or to look at all the options for securing the doses that we had legally procured and that were ours, and which the EU was keeping in Holland, not actually because they wanted to use them themselves. I mean, you remember, Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, said that AstraZeneca was quasi-ineffective, right? I'm not certain that they even used those doses during the crisis.
So can I just ask, what was the advice you were given about Holland?
So look, I mean, I describe it in the book that I'm sitting there in my office in number 10, and I've said, look, theoretically, can we just look at the options here? What the hell can we do? Because they were being very, very obdurate. They were coming up with all sorts of nonsense. And they were trying to stop us getting our legally acquired vaccine doses. And so the military will file in all these generals who've seen all sorts of battles and fought all over the world. And, they're all sort of looking at each other and rolling their eyes. And I think, we all know that it's ridiculous. But I felt it was right, at least pro forma. I thought it was right just to canvass the options.
To ask the question.
Just to ask the question. That's the job of prime ministers. You have to. If your country is facing...
But to invade a NATO ally?
Invade's a strong word, right? It was more of a Pink Panther operation, right? It was going to be more of a Raffles-style burglary. They wouldn't have felt a thing. They wouldn't have felt a thing. We were going to go up the canal, a couple of ribs, Bob's your uncle, into an Arctic, exfiltrate the Arctic, as they say, exfil the Arctic was the language they used, and take the doses back to But, yes, the problem was that the operation would almost certainly have been detected and people would have construed it in that way. But it was right. I was very, very frustrated.
Do you believe the Times were that crazy, or are you that crazy?
Look, don't forget what was happening. I want to go back to what... British people were dying.
All over the world.
And people were dying all over the world. They were very, very frightened. AstraZeneca, and people couldn't get vaccinated faster. They wanted to be protected. Our supply chain was being deliberately interrupted by our friends and partners because they were coming under such huge political pressure from their media. I mean, the people were starting to draw the comparison between the speed of the British vaccine rollout and what was happening in the EU. And they hated the idea that this was one of the benefits of Brexit. They really hated that. And I understand that. And I didn't want to rub their noses in it. I didn't want any. I just wanted the vaccination. I just wanted the vaccines. And they were being very, very difficult. And so that was what that was all about. And, did it show that the Times were crazy? Yes, it probably did. And I think one of the...
Did it show that Boris Johnson was crazy?
No, I don't think so. I think it showed that, like any rational leader of a country faced with an appalling pandemic, you try to protect your population as fast as you can.
We'll come back to pandemics and Brexit and so forth, but just to talk about the current world stage,
yes,
if you like, given your history as Foreign Secretary, if we look at Israel, how would you describe Britain's response to what's happening in Israel today?
Well, I think we began by being very logical and sympathetic, and we understood that what happened on October the 7th, 2023 was an absolute atrocity. 1,200 innocent people killed, hundreds kidnapped, hostages taken. I think there are still, maybe as many as 100 hostages still in Gaza or wherever. And I think there was the official UK position was very supportive for a long time. I'm afraid to say I think that it now seems to have morphed a bit, and
incoherent, I think, is the word you've used to describe it.
Yeah, and I think it's how can we say that, Israel's, the problem basically is this. We all mourn for the people of Gaza, we hearts bleed for the suffering of the people of Gaza. It's appalling. The kids that are losing their lives, the same goes for South Lebanon. It's appalling.
But
the trouble is that in both those communities, the political leadership is in the hands of people who literally want to exterminate the state of Israel and want to kill the Jewish people, every single one of them. Not beginning in Israel, but then everywhere else too, right? Now, it is very, very difficult to expect a democratic government, and under those circumstances, not to take steps to protect its population. That is what I believe the Israelis are trying to do.
How do you reconcile that grief for those thousands and thousands and thousands of deaths with Israel's right to self-defense? I mean, it's a very vexing contradiction, isn't it?
I think it's an absolute tragedy, and the tragedy is that the Palestinian people, who have a right, as the official UK government position, have been, I was a foreign secretary and then prime minister. I've expressed many, many times the official UK government position. Those Palestinian people have the right to a homeland, to a two-state solution. That is what we believe in. But it's very difficult to get that to happen as long as the Palestinians are led by people who don't recognize the right of Israel to exist and who do stuff like October the 7th. And that places, any attempts to get a proper negotiated solution makes it extremely difficult. And I think that Israel must have a right to self-defense, and so it's incoherent for us to say that and to say we stand shoulder to shoulder with Israel, but then to put on an arms embargo.
And so, how do you view Australia's position?
I think it is very, very difficult for us in the UK under the Labour government of Keir Starmer, or for Australia under Mr. Albanese's government. It's difficult for us to call for ceasefires and to try to impose restrictions on Israel when, as far as the Israelis see it, they're fighting an existential struggle against people who want to wipe them out. So, what you're getting from me is, pretty full-throated support for Israel. And, I know that's, a lot of people don't share that anymore, but that's really where I am. And I look at some of the scenes that, we have in London, in Sydney as well, of, people going out and with flags, not just for Hamas, but for Hezbollah or whatever. It seems insane to me. I mean, how can decent, conscientious, liberal people support Hamas when they literally want the execution of gays? I mean, did you see, Nasrallah, the Hezbollah leader that was killed the other day? Everybody, you should have read the obituaries of this guy in some of the liberal media. Oh, great orator, statesman, charismatic, blah, blah, blah. Do you read all that stuff about Nasrallah? Did you see what he said about what the law should prescribe for people whose sexuality he doesn't approve of? I mean, these guys, to call it medieval is an insult to the relative, tolerance of the Middle Ages.
So would you consider Australia's response then to be weak?
I just think we all need moral clarity here. Who's really responsible for an attempt at a genocide? Who's trying to wipe out a country on the basis of their religion, their race? It's. I'm afraid it's Hamas and Hezbollah financed by Tehran.
So why is that message so difficult?
And which is the democracy? Which is the country where equalities are promoted, where women are free and treated completely equally with men, where there's no discrimination against people on the basis of their gender or sexual orientation? It's Israel. Why on earth? Why aren't we supporting them?
So, but why is that moral clarification that you're talking about so difficult to find then for countries like Australia, UK,
search me gov.
Around the world?
I'll tell you why it is, Tara. I'll tell you why it is. And it's a terrible thing to admit, but to face up to. But I think that underneath the floorboards of every Western civilization, every society that has its origins in Europe and Australia, America, are certainly part of that, and probably many other societies around the world. They have under the floorboards, they have the incubating spores of anti-Semitism, and sometimes it's quiescent, and sometimes it comes out, and that spore is potentiated, it comes to life in certain circumstances, and it happened as soon as October the 7th happened in 2023. You saw it immediately. The UK stood shoulder to shoulder with Israel, but that very day, almost immediately, people were out on the streets calling for Palestine to be free from the river to the sea. Their response was not to side with Israel, but to side with people who wanted to kill all the Jewish people. And I thought that was incredible. And I honestly think that is at least one of the problems. I think that there is a tendency beneath the surface of all our cultures, Western liberal cultures and others, to anti-Semitism, and it needs to be checked, and it needs to be called out, and we need to recognise that it's a problem that humanity has, and you've got to fight it. You really have.
If we can move on to Ukraine now,
yes.
Do you think the world is starting to suffer sympathy fatigue?
Look, I think that Australia has been fantastic on Ukraine, and I certainly think that it's understandable that people feel exhausted by the length of time that it is taking. But nobody is more exhausted than the Ukrainian. I mean, these people are heroic, and they are fighting for freedom and democracy everywhere. If Ukraine goes down, it will be a disaster for the Baltic states, for Eastern Europe, for the whole periphery of the former Soviet Union. It'd be a disaster in the South China Sea. It'd be a disaster even in areas of real immediate strategic importance to Australia, because I think China will be emboldened by Russia's success. So please don't let's get sympathy fatigue. To get to your question, John, what the Ukrainians need is the tools to finish the job, so they need the weaponry, they need finance, and they need NATO membership. It
came down, you wrote, to a choice of right and wrong, good and evil in calling out Putin.
I think that's right. I can't think of anything. I can think of very few struggles in modern geopolitics which are so completely black and white, Cartesian, Manichaean. It's good and evil, right and wrong. The Russians, Putin, invaded a free, independent, sovereign European country that was a democracy that had a perfect right to live and choose its own way forward, choose Western institutions. He was utterly brutal. He continues to be utterly brutal. We've got to help the Ukrainians.
Where do you put Donald Trump on that scale then, in terms of his response to Putin? We're hearing of 7 phone calls between them.
Yeah, I saw that.
Questions about their friendship, relationship.
Well, I don't know what happened in those phone calls, or indeed if they even took place. So Bob Woodward is clearly a remarkable journalist. But I can only deal with the world as I see it, and with the facts as they took place when I was Foreign Secretary and then as Prime Minister. And when it came to the relationship between Trump and Russia, the stuff I saw was not a Trump who had some sinister infatuation with bare-chested Vladimir Putin. What I saw was a Trump who was very, very much willing and able to stand up to Russia. So when I was Foreign Secretary, you remember we had that nightmare when the Russians poisoned some people in Salisbury in Wiltshire. It was absolutely, they used chemical weapons on British soil. The Trump administration in Washington surprised massively on the upside and expelled 60 Russian spies. When the Ukrainians were asking for weaponry to fight off the Russians after the 2014 invasion, they didn't get any from the Democrat administrations in Washington. They didn't actually get any lethal aid from us in the UK for a long, long time. But Trump, who supposedly is this great buddy of Putin, he gave the Ukrainians the Javelin shoulder-launched anti-tank missiles, which were actually crucial in helping the Ukrainians to kick Putin's butt. in the battle for Kiev.
But Trump has also said that he'll end the war in Ukraine in a day. Does that not worry you? Because that smacks of surrender, doesn't it?
I'm worried about the whole situation. I'm not.
Do you agree? I'm
not saying I'm not worried, but I am actually optimistic about what a Trump presidency could bring, because I think that when it comes to it, I think that he will not want to begin his presidency as the guy who made the Soviet Empire great again. He wants to be the president who makes America great again. And I don't think any US president can afford to let Ukraine fail. Certainly not.
Why does he
Donald
make
Trump.
sounds like he thinks he doesn't care? Wrapping it up in a day doesn't sound like he's in there for the long fight.
I know that he had a very good conversation the other day with Volodymyr Zelensky. They met in New York a couple of weeks ago, and it went very well. So look, I'm trying to give you how I actually, if you compare the records, what Trump actually did in office by comparison with his Democratic counterparts, there are grounds for optimism, right? That's what I would say.
So you'd vote for him?
No, I didn't say that. No, I'm
It was
not.
a question.
Yeah, well, no, I understand. But look,
You wouldn't vote for him.
I stay out of U.S. elections. What I would say is I think a lot of the left liberal attacks on Donald Trump are misguided, and I think that there are. What I would here's let me put it this way. I think it is plausible for Donald Trump to say, as he does, that if he had been in office in February 2022, then Putin would not have invaded Ukraine. I really think that's a credible claim.
Well,
and I think the world. Look, the world. All human institutions require a leader, right? And for better or worse, America is the leader. I think for better. I'm pro-America, and the world needs a strong US and a strong US presidency. And I think there's every chance, given what I saw before, that Donald Trump will provide that. Let me put it that way.
Okay, so what you're saying then, if it's Trump versus Harris, which it is, you think she's weak?
No, I wasn't saying that. I was trying to be even-handed, but to give you what I think is a positive and optimistic case about Donald Trump.
But why? I mean,
why? Because I'm just fed up with reading all this baloney about, because when I give you another example. Syria, if you remember what happened, Bashar al-Assad launched chemical weapons against his own people, and he was absolutely barbaric. And we had said, the UK had said that we would have reprisals. London did nothing. Washington did nothing. I mean, we put some sanctions on, but we did nothing. Now, when Trump was in the White House and Assad did it, he actually hit that guy's air bases so hard, twice, that Assad never did it again. And I was there, and, I saw the difference, and I thought that was better for the world than being passive. And similarly with the time when he liquidated Qasem Soleimani of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Quds Force, the guy who was orchestrating a lot of the trouble around the whole of the Middle East. I remember how everybody totally freaked out, said, my God, what's Trump done now? But actually, it calmed things down. It put the Iranians on the back foot, and you can make a strong case for what he did. And I've made the point about Ukraine and about Russia. So look, what I'm saying is, I'm not standing this election in America. It's up to the American people to decide what they want to do. I'm just giving my perspective as somebody who saw it up close.
Your perspective does sound like he's your preferred president.
Well, I'm gonna,
That's what it sounds
I don't know. I used to be a U.S. citizen, but I'm not. I was born in
New York.
I was born in New York, but it was a very expensive decision.
They have
tax reasons. They have a very
They
tough.
pursue you around the world.
They do. They do. You're Australian. You don't have to worry about that.
But
No.
given what happened last time around, if your preferred president were to lose, how concerned are you about the civil chaos that might ensue?
Well, I think that would be atrocious, and I think it's very important that whoever wins, whoever loses, has got to accept defeat. Whoever loses has got to accept defeat.
Well, that didn't happen last time, did it?
Well, and I think that was a great mistake. But what did happen was the peaceful transfer of power from one administration to the next, and
With a lot of,
democracy prevailed.
well, with death, with violence,
Yeah, and I think
with
that was
denial of
that
a loss.
I think that was awful. But whatever you may say about that, he's fighting an election now. He's fighting it by democratic means. He's campaigning. And let me just tell you something. The reasons for being optimistic about America and about the world, about democracy, we can sit here. You and I know quite a lot about politics, and collectively, but we genuinely don't know what the outcome of that US election is going to be, do we?
No.
No. And we have our views. I try to give you some reasons to be positive and optimistic about the possibility of Trump.
We have reason.
Don't know.
We do have reason to fear. You can't just wipe out what happened and say that it's not a possibility. It could happen again.
Oh, I see that. You mean the
civil...
Yeah, I think that would be terrible, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Why not?
Because I just don't think it will happen. I think it will be a terrible, terrible mistake. And anyway, but that American election, the election for the most important political post in the world, is genuinely uncertain right now. Right? Now, you cannot say that about what takes place in China, what takes place in Russia, in Tehran. And it's a magnificent thing. It's genuinely in the hands of the people of the United States. And yes, you can say, well, it's just 30,000 people in a few swing states. But you don't know that, really. You don't know where the real swing areas are going to be. It could change. Anything can happen.
But
That's a fantastic thing.
Yes, but
it's democracy.
You and I admire democracy in this conversation. But we're talking about a man who didn't.
He was democratically defeated, and he went out of office.
It.
Well, I don't see him in the White House now.
Well, he was, but he didn't accept it. He claims that he was robbed, that he was cheated out of that.
You say that he didn't accept the outcome of the election. I agree that was wrong, okay? I really do. And I've said that to him. I've said I think that was totally wrong. But you nevertheless had the peaceful transfer of power. But I'll give you...
Those scenes at Capitol Hill were not peaceful.
It's not a unique phenomenon. There was... In our country, there was a referendum on the EU, and it went against the Remain side. Yeah. Would you say that they meekly accepted the result? No. They spent years trying to frustrate it. They took a huge number of legal cases to try to stop it going through. They came up with all sorts of models of Brexit that weren't really Brexit. And to this day, they continue, Tara, to say that referendum was a fraud and a sham and was based on lies, and that the people were misled, and that it was all wrong.
But they didn't incite violence in their argument.
So when I came out of my house after we'd won that referendum on June the 24th, 2023, I had people banging on the roof of my car, screaming at me, and it went on for days and days and days, calling me four-letter words of a kind that are not fit for Channel 9 Australia, okay? a lot of them. And the anger and the vituperation that was directed against those who had led the Leave campaign was very, very intense, and actually remains intense today. And if you want to understand why I'm, giving you this interview rather than getting on with stuff in number 10, it's very largely, or substantially, because of that residual fury of the elite liberal opinion about what they thought was a fraudulent referendum result, which they never really accepted. And they are still trying to overturn. So Starmer, the Labour Prime Minister, is trying to take the UK back into to the orbit of Brussels in all sorts of ways. I'm just saying that, yes, I think it was wrong of Donald Trump not to accept the outcome. But there's at least one good example, counterexample I can think of, where the left liberal establishment frenziedly refused to accept the outcome of a popular decision.
In your book, you describe AUKUS as a brilliant and ambitious geostrategic proposal, and you claim to have brought it about.
Look, no. I was I was the midwife.
You delivered it.
One of the midwives, and so this was this Scott Morrison really conceived it. But the original, the original parents of AUKUS, I think, were probably the admirals, the military in our two countries, who got together and talked over the problems that we had with particular types of submarine and how to fix it, and whether there was technology that we could share. And from that idea, it already grew. And I think the beauty of AUKUS is it's about countries that are so politically trusting of each other, so close, that share values so emotionally close, that they're willing to share the really most secret nuclear technology, and but around that, clearly a lot of other stuff is now being built. I'm very excited by that. I think it needs to keep going.
But in your book, you talk about finagling, basically meetings where you
finagling.
Yes.
Well,
and trying to keep the French out of it.
Well, we had to, but it was okay. But this wasn't my Tara. This wasn't a bad thing to do, right? We had a difficult situation. It wasn't so. The problem with the submarines wasn't our problem. It was Australia's problem. I think Malcolm Turnbull had commissioned some French diesel submarines, which were going to make too much noise. I think it's all in Unleashed, which I haven't mentioned for a very long time, and they were taking a long time to arrive, and they didn't look as though they were actually what Australia needed. So they wanted to know whether we could do a deal. Could we help out? The problem was that the technology that we needed to share was actually technology that we also imported from the
US.
United States, and that they had a lot of the as it were, the proprietary rights over it, or they were. The way it works is that although the UK has an independent nuclear deterrent, the United States is very, very careful about how we administer the nuclear technology, and so they wanted that to be applied equally to Australia. So we had to get Joe Biden involved, and so at Carbis Bay, the beautiful place in Cornwall where we had the G7 summit, I had to organise a three-way meeting between myself, Scott Morrison, and Joe Biden, and so we had to exclude Emmanuel. That was the whole point, and which was difficult at Carbis Bay because the French were knocking around and sort of wondering what was going on, and of course, the way it worked was that Scott couldn't stand the French down until he'd got the AUKUS deal lined up. So he couldn't fall between two stools. And so it was embarrassing. He couldn't be frank with Emmanuel, and I couldn't give away what was going on. So yes, we had to organize a meeting where the French were not invited, and which took place under their nose. But I don't regret it, because there was simply no other way of doing it. And what I say in the book is that France is a great power and a great country, and clearly has a history of interest and involvement in the Pacific. And one day I'm sure that France will somehow be engaged in in AUKUS or in projects associated with AUKUS as well. But the only way of doing it at the time was for the UK and Australia and America to go ahead, and that's what we did. And there was a bit of a kerfuffle and a lot of raucous caucus from the anti-AUKUS caucus, as I recall. But it was totally the right thing to do.
Our former Prime Minister Paul Keating describes the AUKUS Pact as the worst deal in all history. He said the UK is looking around for suckers to create global Britain after that fool Johnson destroyed their place in Europe.
Is this? Well, I think he's wrong, and I think that the AUKUS Pact is a great thing for the UK, the US, and Australia, and the world. I think that we need to stand together in the Asia-Pacific region, and we need to assert our values. The AUKUS isn't about being hostile to anybody. It's not about being adversarial to China. I just think it's the right thing to do. Well, why is he so hostile to AUKUS? I thought it was relatively uncontroversial. What's wrong with this guy?
He's sounding a bit hostile towards you, isn't he? He called you a fool.
Well, I don't mind about that, but why is he hostile to AUKUS?
In that relationship, it ties us to a more aggressive approach against China. These are the concerns that are raised.
I think it's very, very important for everybody to be strong. I think when you're strong and you stand together, you're going to have a much, much better chance of protecting each other and ensuring peace and stability. And it's when you give ground, like letting Putin take the Donbass and Crimea, or not being tough with terrorists, then not being tough with Iran, not being resolute with China, that's when you start to get pushed back. And I would totally disagree with his approach. And I'm surprised that.
Well, certainly some of the concerns raised around the AUKUS deal. And when you say it's not about any particular nation, I mean, everybody believes it is. They do believe it is about protecting Australia and the region against China.
Well, I think it's sensible for Western democracies or liberal democracies, whether Western or otherwise, Asia-Pacific democracies, to stand together and to stand up for our values. And I think that that is what the Chinese actually respect, and what they get that much more than talking out of both sides of our mouth. I mean, if we're strong and reasonable, and we say we're going to stick up for our principles, we won't allow the the law of the sea to be flouted. We won't allow China to get away with aggrandizement in the the 9-dash line and all the rest of it. Then they're more likely to respect that. And everything I've seen in my time as Foreign Secretary and Prime Minister is that being tough and being resolute is actually the best way to peace and calm and stability.
Do you expect there to be war between the US and China?
Provided we're tough, no. And one of the ways to avoid that, I think, is to make sure that people really get it, that we mean business when it comes to international borders, to the rule of law, and you can't change borders by force, whether in Straits of Taiwan or Ukraine. And that's the way to do it. And I think AUKUS makes a huge amount of sense for all of us.
In getting Brexit done,
Yes.
are you the bloke that broke Britain?
Of course not. Not only. On the contrary, I'm the bloke. I tried laboriously to say at the beginning, Tara, of our talk, that one of the advantages of Brexit was it enabled us to do things differently. Fastest vaccine rollout in Europe, which enabled us to have the fastest, to save loads of lives of elderly and vulnerable people, and have the fastest economic rebound.
Which, during a catastrophic time, is what you want and the most desirable outcome.
Yeah.
But since then, if you look at the economics of what's happening in Britain, can...
Go on.
Well, listen, according to a 2024 independent report from Cambridge, the cost of Brexit to the UK's economy is £140 billion.
Do me a
The
favour.
average Brit is £2,000 worse off.
So the UK has outgrown Germany since the referendum. It has outgrown Italy. It's outgrown many other European companies.
The size of the economy was 6% less in 2023 than it would have been if the UK had remained.
Last time I looked, Germany was a member of the EU. I think you will agree that Germany is a member of the EU. How come when I ceased to be Prime Minister, we had unemployment at a 50-year low. We had 620,000 more people in paid employment than before the pandemic began. And I've given you the figures for our GDP growth, for our financial sector, exports, everything else. You know, people say that, you know, the Leave campaign misrepresented, you know, the size of the bill that we paid to Brussels. Actually, we didn't. We were completely right about that. But nobody points out that the types of people you just quoted, the Remain campaign, all these academics, all these economists, do you remember what they were saying about Brexit? They said there were going to be 1 million people unemployed. Huh? Why aren't they being brought snivelling onto the BBC to answer for their lies? Why aren't they excoriated?
So you don't accept
No,
those
I don't.
figures?
I certainly don't.
And you don't
Why aren't they
accept...
excoriated for the way that they misled the British public? What, you know, they told, and they threatened people with a punishment tax-raising budget if they had the temerity to vote Leave. They did. Did you see a punishment budget? Did you see unemployment soar? It was nonsense.
So Brexit is good for Britain?
And I've given you what I hope our viewers will agree is one powerful example of why Brexit really helped at a crucial time and saved the lives, as I explained in detail. Of course it's fair to ask.
It's fair to ask what happens post-COVID.
And so...
What happens to the average Brit? What happens to the economy? They're fair questions.
Of course. And, you know, when I was Prime Minister, we had the fastest economic rebound in the G7 and very, very low unemployment. The UK was producing, I think, more unicorns, you know, £1 billion tech startup companies, far more, I think, than France and Germany and Israel put together. I think it was about one every fortnight. We had a bigger tech sector than anywhere except the United States and possibly China, depending on how you calculate it. You know, the UK economy, to say nothing of our pop music, which seems, you know, incredibly seductive to the people of the world. Right? But, you know, the UK economy remains unbelievably and robust, and we'll get more robust. And the point about Brexit is that in a global economy, when standards for food hygiene or machine tools or whatever are basically increasingly set globally, then what we should be aiming for is much freer trade and cooperation between sovereign independent countries where people know who is ruling them. The problem with the EU system is it was so undemocratic. Laws were being passed which could not be changed by Britain, but which applied to Britain forever. And that ultimately is not right for the UK.
At the helm during COVID,
yes,
you described that as utterly agonising and so lonely.
Yes.
What made it so difficult for you?
Because the choices, just as I think Scott found in Australia, the choices were so appallingly difficult. What I still find hard to interpret is the extent to which the lockdowns, the non-pharmaceutical interventions, actually bent the epicurve, and the extent to which that was happening anyway. Because you look at what happened across the world, whether it was Australia or Sweden or China or Britain, you had two humps, right? A double sine curve, and to what? So the question, the exam question for all of us, and I go into it a lot in the book, is: did the benefit of our interventions outweigh the disbenefit of the lockdowns? And that is the question we have to answer. You ask, why was it agonizing? Because I knew that I had to save lives, but I also knew that closing schools and measures like that was going to be bitterly, bitterly difficult, and that people would suffer, and that there would be no easy way to restore what they had lost. And, the thing about running a country during a time like COVID is there's absolutely no way that the decisions can be taken by anybody else. And a lot of it is funneled up to you, and you're sitting there and you just have to say, okay, we got to do this, we got to do this. And there's a lot of decisions to take.
Yeah, and not so sure they were right.
I think they were right. But so that we have a committee of inquiry now in the UK, led by a judge, Dame Heather Hallett, and I hope she will look into this.
Partygate, sorry or not sorry?
Well, of course I'm sorry for the things I got wrong and the things we got wrong. But what I've tried to explain, looking back on it now, with a slight sense of exasperation, discovering that Sue Gray, the person I put in charge of being the inquisitor into this, who was presented to me as a model of political impartiality, then went straight across to be chief of staff of the leader of the Labour Party.
Yes, but invitations to 100 to join a garden party, staff on camera scoffing at the rules. You're a seasoned politician. You know the optics of that.
Optics is the word.
Terrible.
Optics is the word. And I think that actually, when I look back on it, I think that people nobody thought, I don't think people went to those things thinking they were deliberately breaking the rules. I think that they were working blindingly hard round the clock, doing stuff like the vaccine rollout. And I think that, if anything, what I wish I'd done, really, looking back, was that I'd been more robust in the defence of my officials and because I think, we were working, and it was a very, very hard time.
Yeah. You saw the Queen 2 days before she died. You now, quite controversially, since your book has been released, detailed the reason for her death, bone cancer. Why did you do that? Why did you breach protocol?
Well, I didn't, and this was something, and I actually made sure the book was read properly, and nobody objected to that, but for the good reason that that had already been in the public domain.
But if the Queen didn't want the cause of death to be...
that had already been put in the public domain by somebody with a even greater royal authority. But do you think the Queen would have been happy? And look, it was already in the public domain. And I think if you readers of Unleashed will find that it contains, I try to portray the Queen as I knew her, as I was privileged to
You said if necessary you would die for her.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. She was an extraordinary leader. And Barack Obama said she was the most impressive leader he'd ever met. And it was a great, great privilege to sit with her, for an hour a week and imbibe her wisdom. And she had some incredible, she knew she'd met every leader from, Mao Zedong to Xi Jinping, from, de Gaulle to Macron, from, Dwight D. Eisenhower to Trump. She knew them all. And it was unbelievable talking to her. She knew them all. And can you believe it? And she gave me do people in Australia worry about magpies?
Yes, they do, but not for seeing a sole magpie, but being swooped.
Being swooped? Really?
In magpie season, yeah.
And what happened? Well, okay, I don't know. Well, let me just tell you that in the UK, people worry about solitary magpies. I don't know why, but I certainly have it. If I see a single magpie, I freak out. And I was swimming with the Queen, and she had exactly the same thing. It's a superstition, right? And it's bad luck. And she gave me a very good apotropaic spell for curing the problem of the single magpie. And what you do is you say, "Good morning, Mr. Magpie." If assuming it's the morning. Today is the 9th of October, Wednesday, the 9th of October, 2024. And that's it.
It's gone.
And then, magpie problem gone. And because otherwise you have to try to see a pair, because it's 1 for sorrow, 2 for joy, 3 for gold, 4 boy. You know the rhyme. And so instead of having to go to great lengths to see another magpie, just say that. There you go. Tip from the top. If you're worried about magpies.
Would you die for the king?
Of course. And I think, by the way, that obviously I hope not to. If it can be possibly avoided. But in an ideal world, I'd rather not. But I do think one of the amazing things about the UK is how seamlessly and kind of invisibly people's support and affection for the crown transferred from his mother to the king, and he's doing a brilliant job.
And you tried to keep Prince Harry here, did you?
I know, it was one of my fits of pomposity. I was worried that because I thought he was a great asset to the country, and how did that work for you? Total failure. Because he was great with the disabled veterans. He and his wife Meghan were great in a Commonwealth summit I did, and I thought they were a force for good. So I had a kind of manly pep talk and said, why not stay in the UK? No good. So I did not avert what Megxit, but I did deliver Brexit.
You also said, but nobody would care if they went to California. Did you mean that nobody cared? That they didn't mind, or that?
I thought that he had a lot to contribute in this country, and there you go.
You have said that the problem with politics is that it's addictive. It's in your book.
Yes, unleashed. So when will you be back? Unvarnished, uncensored. I'm living a life of blissful, rustic obscurity. Apart from the times when I'm on, Channel 9 Australia promoting my book. I think one of the things the Queen said was, you should really only do stuff where you think you can be useful. And we got a Tory leadership campaign going on right now. I'm going to be loyal to whoever wins, and I think that Labour is stuffing it up so much right now that whoever gets it is going to have every chance of getting into power.
You're very excellent at not answering that question.
What was that? Did I not answer the question? What was it? I think the answer to the question, that's because the answer to the question, Tara, is to be found in the pages of Unleashed.
No. Thank you very much for your time.
Not at all. It's a pleasure.
Hello, I'm Tara Brown. Thanks for watching 60 Minutes Australia. Subscribe to our channel now for brand new stories and exclusive clips every week. And don't miss out on our extra minute segments and full episodes of 60 Minutes on 9now.com.au and the 9Now app.